I'm
Uh,
really excited to talk about this today. This topic of, you know, well, let me just back up. This whole series, Missing Chapters, is really around those topics that aren't in the handbook, that aren't in something you learned in a degree or something you wish you would have learned maybe earlier on in your career. And I'm excited to talk to Skylar because I think this is such an important topic for us to discuss, especially as we think about hiring and how do we balance that hiring for now and for the future. So
mhm.
I'm your host. I will be guiding this conversation, and I'm so excited to have Skylar on because Skylar, I have known about you and what you've been doing over at Hope for Haiti. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I'm just really excited you're here.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on today. And just really grateful for the opportunity to talk about one of the most important things in my mind, which is people. We really believe that you can have a great strategic plan and you can have a good budget, but those two things are only as good as the people who are implementing. And so my name's Skyler Badenoch. I'm the CEO of Hope for Haiti. Been helping run the organization for the last 8 years. And my background is in international development. I was a Peace Corps volunteer many, many years ago in West Africa, Ivory Coast, and then moved over to went to graduate school at the George Washington University, and then moved over to an organization called Build On, building schools all around the world. And I did that for a decade, both on the
Wow.
management side and the fundraising side. And then I had the honor and the opportunity to join the team at Hope for Haiti. And so I'm part of an amazing team of people who are focused on improving the quality of life for Haitian people, particularly women and children. And we do that because we have a team on the ground that is highly skilled, highly dedicated, very perseverant in the face of enormous challenges. They are doctors and nurses, they're educators, they're administrators, and they do incredibly inspiring work and important work, lifting up people in their community and by improving education and healthcare and access to clean water and economic development in the southern part of Haiti. And oftentimes people ask about Haiti and they say, listen, we've heard that Haiti's a difficult place to work in, and we've heard that there's gang violence and unrest, and some people say we've heard that there's no hope, and we absolutely fundamentally reject that as an organization. We know there's hope. We know there's it's possible to help make things better for individuals, families, communities. And that's what we strive to do every single day at Hope for Haiti, is to resource and empower our leaders, friends in Haiti, so that they can do good work for their community members. And we get to see the outputs every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year at Hope for Haiti. And so just really proud to be part of the team and be part of something that I feel is much, much bigger than myself.
That's super inspiring. Super inspiring. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about what you do and the awesome organization you help lead every day. So, okay, Skylar, let's jump
Let's get into
into
it.
it. Yes, get into it. Like,
All
I'm
right.
super pumped. This is really those who may have just popped in. Missing Chapters is a series in which we discuss topics that maybe weren't discussed previously in any other, handbook or in a career development class or anything like that. And today we're really talking about how do we build for tomorrow. I can't think of anyone better to have with us. And so, Skylar, thank you for joining us. Okay, so to kick things off, let's just jump right into it. And
But
I want to like pick your brain here and how you view like what are organizations like getting wrong about hiring for immediate performance versus
mm,
long-term potential?
I love that question because, we've been thinking a lot about, when you hire, like, what are you looking for, and who's going to be the hire that the team member, the colleague who's going to serve the mission, not for, the first 90 days. Because I think we always put a big focus on, okay, like we hired
Mm,
somebody, here's your 90-day plan. And it's then you're going to show that you've contributed to the organization and you're on a path to making like transformational impact in your role. And it doesn't always happen that way. Like the impact cycle is much longer than 90 days. If
mm,
you're in fundraising, the development cycle is sometimes the development cycles 24 months. And so I think oftentimes too many organizations really but too much focus on the first 90 days instead of like thinking it like, what do the first 2 years look like? And then after that, what are the first, what are the next 3 years look like? And so, I think that sometimes the mistake is you over prioritize this like immediate output over like, can this person make a transformational impact in the organization over the course of a long period of time? And so that's what I think organizations
Hmm.
are oftentimes getting wrong.
Yeah, so why do you think there's just that temptation then to like want to hire that superstar so fast, so
It's
strong,
I know,
like how do you like I know it's fast-paced hiring environment today. So
yeah,
like yeah, why do you
you're
think that's a
exactly right.
temptation?
It's speed. And I think that's because we live in this like very fast pace, high stakes world where there's this sense of urgency to have somebody come in and just be an absolute superstar.
Mm,
And that sometimes exists. It can be it's possible and it's happened. I've seen it happen. But there's another side, and I think there's another path, which is, instead of like hiring somebody who is just like gonna crush it for 6 to 9 months or 12 months or 24 months and then leave because they're looking for something else. Like I think there is some value in taking a look at people who are they stay, they have a history of staying at places
mm,
and really making an impact, and improving on performance and improving on output and adding to the value of the culture of an organization,
mhm,
and even being a servant leader within an organization. Those
mhm.
things oftentimes are overlooked because we're like, we need to hire somebody now, and that person needs to make this impact tomorrow, or that person needs to raise this money, or in the case of like a for-profit, that's this person needs to bring in x amount of dollars in sales immediately. And so I think oftentimes there's somebody out there with growth potential that gets overlooked.
That's so interesting. Do you feel like it's partially because we wait too long to hire? And maybe you can share a
Well,
story where, you hired someone that wasn't like super polished on paper, or you just saw that potential and, were able to bring them and develop them into a long-term asset.
yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things about that, and I don't think waiting too long is a bad thing, because sometimes you fall into a situation where like, okay, we're going to hire for a position, and that position just doesn't have any candidates that are good fits. And I
Mm.
don't believe in a perfect fit, by the way. I never have. I don't think there's a such thing as a perfect fit. I think everybody has room to grow. Even the CEO, like that's an important distinction to be made. There's never a perfect fit. And if you start waiting for a perfect fit or you hire somebody you think is a perfect fit, there's going to be disappointment. There's
Mm.
going to be disappointment. And so I think that's one thing, waiting. Um, and then sometimes, you know, when you're building a team, you have to take into account not just like, is this person, you know, sometimes people are really good interviews. I've had really good interviews with people, and then sometimes it just doesn't work out because they interview better than they perform. And I've had the case, I've also um, worked with some folks, and I wouldn't want to say who right now, but I worked with some folks who I'm like, that interview was just okay. And I wasn't the main hiring manager. Um, and so I was in on the interview process, but that person who just had an okay interview was like the person who's still working and making an impact 5 years later, 8 years later, at a high level, and has been on
Huh.
their own journey of professional and personal development, and they haven't held the same job that they were hired for, and they're holding a senior leadership position at Hope for Haiti. Um,
Wow.
and so I think there's something to be said about that, and that is like, don't just take one or two things into consideration when you're hiring somebody, especially when you're like, this person is gonna just come out and hit a bunch of grand slams for you. Rarely do I see it play out like,
Yeah, even those that yeah, have like the most polished
Yeah.
resume or the most polished interviewing experience. So
Well,
how do you
and
like
and I
spot
wanted to
those
give you
too?
another example because I
Yeah,
have one of
please.
my favorite examples. It's a story really, but it's back to when I first started working in Haiti, and I had to go hire people. I had to hire a construction team, and um, had to hire folks who were going to go out and do participatory development work. And
Hmm.
so I did, and we had a small budget and a very short timeline, and so we had to get this. We had to get a school built and show that we had to show proof of concept that we were going to be able to open up a school construction program in Haiti. And so I hired like three people, and the first person who I hired was like the highest level. He was like the manager, and he spoke English really well. That's probably one of the reasons I hired him because I didn't speak Creole very well at the time. I was like, I need somebody I can communicate.
Hmm.
And then, like underneath him, I hired a construction like engineer, and then underneath the engineer, there was like a mason and sort of like a sort of technical construction guy. So these three guys, we went out to go build our first school. And there's this particular methodology that we were working with where you have to like everybody has to participate. This isn't like it's not like a school you build. Like the moms and dads are carrying rocks and digging the foundation of the school.
Hmm.
The parents are doing it, and as a team member of the organization I was working for, Bill, on, you have to do it too. Like you have to lead by example. And so the guy who I hired was like the manager was like, I'm a manager. I'm going to watch, and I'm going to watch everybody do the work, and maybe even like maybe caught him napping or something like that under a tree. I'm like, this is, and we did some redirection, and we were all we were working in this community. We are all trying to get this school built, and so there's leniency because I like he doesn't know the culture. We're like in our first week of work. And so I was like, well, no, this is how we're going to do it. This is how it has to be done. And we had to have like there were like multiple occasions where this person just didn't get the methodology, but the other two people did. And so the funny part of the story is, and I'll try to make it as short as possible, but we're all sleeping in the same house, and we're sleeping in it's a fishing village, so like every house is like a 2 or 3 bedroom house, and we're all kind of just sleeping next to each other, like on the floor. And so I had to go back to the United States, but it wasn't working out with this guy, and so I was like, the next day I had to leave. I had to let him go, and so it was at night. I told the two guys, I'm like, hey, because the engineer, I was like, hey, I'm going to promote you up. You're going to run this program. You know exactly what we're trying to do. And the skilled worker was just the best. He became like both those two guys became like my colleagues for many years, but also two of my best friends in Haiti over the next decade. Just amazing people, and we became great friends. But the other guy, I was actually sleeping right next, like next to, in a big room. And I was like, okay, I'd be like, this is your last day, and we're gonna let you go, and we're gonna give you a few. And then I was like, all right, good night. And I like turned around, and all of a sudden my friends started giggling. They're like, man, you better sleep with one eye open because,
Yeah.
and that's not a normal situation. Like
Yeah.
I've never found myself in that situation before. By the way, I was really early in my career, but I'll never forget it because I was like, never have I, had to do that in that circumstance. And it all worked out, but I just,
Yeah.
it was a good lesson. And it was my mistake. I was just hiring for immediacy. Like, I'm like, oh, this
Mm,
guy speaks English. He says he talks a pretty good game. And it turned out he just didn't get it. He didn't get what we
mm,
were trying to do. And so the other two guys did, and they were hustlers, and they loved to work on the work site and inspire people, and were great at community development. And they took they really were the reason why today they built the first school there, but today there's like I think 125 schools that this
wow.
organization has built in Haiti,
That's
and
awesome.
plus I don't know, I've lost track, but those two guys are the reason that because they were the foundation, they're no longer there, um, but
Mm,
it's a good lesson to me, right?
yeah.
And so, um,
Yeah, I love that. It's like you can clearly look back on it now through this experience and be
oh
like,
my gosh, yeah,
hired for immediacy, but what I really needed is X, Y, and Z. So like, okay, that's one example. That's pretty
yes.
funny. Like who has to fire
I mean,
someone that they are, sharing a room
Sharing
with.
a room with. Yeah.
Hopefully no one else on this call.
Yeah.
Um, so Skylar, now that you've had time to reflect on that and years of just reflection, how do you personally spot these candidates who have resilience and adaptability and kind of like those, more, checklist things that are going to, like those two guys, the engineer and the skilled worker, that are going
Yeah.
to take your company further than you could even imagine in that scenario when that happened?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things you can do, and you can't always get it right, but I think there's some questions you can ask within the interview process. So the interview process is really important. Asking the right questions, asking examples, because sometimes through people's examples and real life experiences, you can glean a little bit about like how they would fit into your work culture. Um, and oftentimes, by the way, like when we're hiring, we're not just hiring for like, is this person going to be a good fit for the position? Like, could this person do the job? But we also think about like, does this first person fit into the core values of the organization? And so we're very intentional about our core values. It's resilience, empowerment, accountability, collaboration, and hope. And so oftentimes we're asking questions about how people share or show resilience in their work. People show up when it's time to be accountable, how they empower others and giving examples. And then for me, hope, you know, collaboration, one of the biggest things that we do at Hope for Haiti. It's not just like we're not just collaborating with partners, we're collaborating with each other. And so having colleagues who feel comfortable collaborating with each other, um, regardless of who gets like the credit for what goes right or the credit for what goes wrong, really like that collaboration is such an important piece. And so asking the interview questions that help us sort of determine how people are aligned with their core values is definitely something that's helped us along the interview process. And then, not just the questions and the examples, references help. So, we can always check references. And I appreciate a good story. So, if somebody can tell me a story about if it's a fundraising job, I'm always like, tell me a story about when you raised money that helped somebody, you know,
Mm.
move the mission forward. And you either have that or you don't. You could tell really quickly. Like if you asked me that question, I'd tell you I got 100 of those stories about a donor who I met in a relationship that I was lucky enough to be a part of that ended up in a donation that supported a mission or supported an organization or helped somebody out. So if you're in that fundraising position, you probably have to have those stories. Otherwise, you kind of see right through it. Um, and that kind of goes for, if it's a management position or an admin position, being able to tell the story of how you've successfully been able to navigate it previously helps. Um, and so that's what I'd say. I mean, again, I go back to this idea that nobody's perfect. And so, you kind of have to have a methodology for interviewing, have a rubric, do all your due
Mhm.
diligence as you possibly can, and then like cross your fingers that it's the right fit. Um, because sometimes it's not, and it feels terrible. Nobody wants that. I remember somebody asked me one time I was interviewing for a candidate, and one of the people who managed above me said, "Well, how do you know if this person is honest?" And I said, "Well, I just asked them, and they said they were honest." So, and of course they're going to say they're honest. So you can't
Yeah.
really know everything until you really get deep into the working together process and collaborating and sharing core values and working towards something that's bigger than ourselves. And so um, there's a methodology for sure, but there's also part of it feels pretty lucky sometimes. Um, and so you got to put yourself in the best position to have the best possible luck that you can.
Oh, I like that. Put yourself in the best possible position to have the best possible luck.
Give me one
I
second because I'm
like
going to
that.
write that down.
Oh,
I
I'm
did
like,
not
I'm
have that. It's just,
literally
yeah.
writing it down myself. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
because you're right. Because like,
Yeah.
you can't leave it all to chance, but you have to prepare yourself. And I
Yeah.
like that you mentioned things like, having questions formatted around your core values. Like if you never
Yep.
ask the question, how are you supposed to evaluate it? And I like it seems so simple, but yet it's something that each organization can truly take a step back and be like, are these questions really hitting on those points where we're
Yeah.
asking, are they resilient? Do they have some of these, of course, resume characteristics, but back to your core values of what are they again? Resilience, hope, accountability,
The
collaboration,
acronym's REACH. So resilience, empowerment, accountability, collaboration, and hope.
empowerment. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
accountability, collaboration, empowerment. Yeah, see that, and and having that rubrics that helps align to that sets you up for the best
And
possible luck.
yeah. And then as you know, like the hiring process is one step. So is the onboarding. And I'm a firm believer, like onboarding can't just stop at 90 days like that, or like,
Mm.
this is our 90-day plan, that whole thing. I think that puts organizations in a bad position.
Hmm.
I think that the best thing we could do is intentionally and collaboratively board people for a long time and coach and provide support to people as they are in their roles, even if they're doing amazing job, even if even if people are like, we don't need help. Like it's just to me, it's a better way of doing things when you feel like you're part of a team that's collaborating, that
Hmm.
people have your success um, viewed as their success. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but
Oh
like,
yeah.
but that's
Yes.
super important. Like, and I say this all like I I feel like this with my colleagues. If they succeed, that feels like a success to me. Like it feel like when I've had colleagues who like perform really well on something, like feels like success to me when you do that. When you're able to do, extraordinary things in the face of, because I get to be, I feel like I'm part of it, and I hope we all feel like that. And so I think when you can create that kind of environment, um,
Mm.
good things will happen. The inverse is true, you know. So the inverse is true, and so
Very
we
true.
don't go into detail about it, but we know that, you know, if your failure feels like somebody else's success, that is a recipe for disaster, and that's not the right culture you want to be a part of.
No, I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what are some
Mm,
of the things that you've done at Hope for Haiti to help foster that kind of culture? Because I think it does play a huge role in that you have the right people and then
yeah.
to
Well,
succeed as a
I think the
team.
thing that I believe deeply in this, and maybe sometimes it's been tested, and sometimes it's felt like maybe there's some flaws in this way of leadership. But the thing that I feel like I've done the most is to make space for other people to lead. That to
Mm.
me is the thing, is to give up this idea that like CEO is the one and only authoritative voice within an organization, and just make sure that my colleagues know that they have a voice, not just a voice, but like it's their input that will matter. And so that's the first thing. And I think that comes along with maybe the ability to at least have some space for not being right, or have space for doing things a different way, or trying things a different way.
Hmm.
And when leaders are able to do that, I think that might empower others to take more risks, or even have ownership and autonomy in their work. And I just think about myself, when I was coming up, what helped and worked with me, and it doesn't help and work with everybody, but what helped and worked with me was like when somebody's like, okay, here's your goal, go get it. You figure it out. You get to figure
Mm.
out how you do it. And nobody was like, you should do it this way and walk this way and talk this way. They're like, the end goal is yours, and let it speak for itself. And that to me is I thrive on that. And sometimes you fall short, and that's where accountability comes in. Sometimes you blow it out of the water, and you exceed your expectations. And that can feel really amazing. So there's that at Hope for Haiti. One other thing I think that has been very helpful to our organization, because we're 36 years in, is hiring and working to promote performing team members. as they succeed in providing a career path for people beyond 1 or 2 years. And so we have several team members who have been with the organization for 8, 9, 10 years, and they haven't held the same job, but they've contributed in significant levels, and they continue to contribute significant levels. And that to me is a good sign of an organization that brings people along, that allows room for growth, that values performance and creates a team environment. Um,
Mhm.
and so, that's just those are a couple things. Um, and and then I think here's one last thing I think is really important is that this work is super serious. Like sometimes it's life and death, and sometimes like it feels heavy. And Haiti will make it feel what's going on in Haiti will make it feel even heavier. And so one of the things that I try to remind myself and others is that we have to be and stay humorous, even not like inappropriately, but we gotta have a way to like laugh at ourselves, laugh at the situation, like find humor in the work, find humor in the things that challenge us. And sometimes that just gives everything a little bit of levity so that we're not just always overwhelmed by the crushing challenges that we feel like we face every day.
Wow, I like that a lot. Give yourself permission to do that.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah, I like
remember
that.
I remember when it was the 2021 earthquake. The 2021
Oh
earthquake in
yeah.
Haiti. It was a really tough time for us. And it wasn't like 2010, which was also just an incredibly challenging time, but 2021. And we were doing very meaningful relief work, like humanitarian relief work for people who were displaced, homeless, maybe injured, seeking access to care or water. And heavy. It felt heavy. And I can specifically remember a couple times when we kind of took a break, and especially with our drivers at Hope for Haiti, these guys, shout out to our drivers, by the way, because they're in some ways, in many ways, the backbone of what we do at Hope for Haiti because they get us safely to from point A to point B. They transport materials to, the
Oh,
places
okay.
that are hard to get to. They're also some of the funniest guys and like on the team. And so I remember it was during the earthquake and there's just some jokes and laughing and it was a good reminder that even in the darkest days, in
Hmm.
some of the hardest days, like you can still figure out a way to get a smile out of somebody, and that goes a long way.
It does go a long way. You feel
Yeah,
extra supported too, that you can be both human and also, give yourself just a little bit of a break
you
from
do. You
from
do.
that
You're right.
heaviness.
Yep.
I can relate a little bit with that sometimes, as we try to help people get access to healthcare. And sometimes they get denied a claim, and that's very heavy and it's life-threatening sometimes when they can't get that surgery they needed. And so, but just to give yourself permission to find humor, smile, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so you brought up a few points that I want to ask follow-up questions for
All right.
because
Bring 'em.
finding the right candidate so important for this, immediate needs versus long term. And there is an element, and you said this earlier, of like trying to find someone who's like a culture fit versus like a
Mm,
culture add, and
mm.
ensuring they're maybe both. I don't know. I love to hear
Yeah.
just like your methodology around as someone, who is in interviewing positions needs to address both of those as part of the strategy of like immediate need versus long term.
Yeah. I just go back to this idea that no person and candidate is perfect. And so like you have to look at everything. The complexity of hiring plays a significant role in who you end up hiring. And you have to be a little bit flexible too. Like you might find that like look, you have to weigh everything, and that's why I think having a rubric helps. But if you weigh things, and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, we have like three candidates who are high potential growth, but we have one candidate who can be just an absolute superstar. And
Hmm.
you can still weigh that and be like, you know what, we're going with a superstar because we need a superstar right now anyway. And or like we're kind of in a mode where we need to develop a deep bench for our organization. And so maybe we go with people who are like going to grow into this role. And so that's what I mean by
Hmm.
it's situational.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
my family members depend. Like I was having to argue with my mom about something the other day, and I was
Uh-oh.
like, she's like, "What is it? This or that?" And I'm like, "It depends. It all depends." And she's like, "Depends on what?" I'm like, "Depends on everything. It depends on a lot of different things all at once." And so that's what hiring to me is like. It all depends. But
Hmm.
I think having a methodology, being a rubric that you use, following some best practices, knowing what you think, like trusting your gut in some instances helps. Um, and then, making that decision, being decisive, and trying to support the heck out of that person once they're on board, because that's
Hmm.
just a big part of it. And, once you bring somebody onto an organization, there's a cost to everybody. There's a cost to everybody. There's a cost to the organization.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a cost to the person who's spending their time, and their lively, their good chunk of their life, 8
Yeah.
hours, sometimes more a day. So there's a cost, and so we have to be think careful and treat that decision with a lot of like there's sanctity to the decision that we make when we hire people, and we try to give it our best shot, and then know do the best we can to support and make it successful for both the organization or the business or whatever it is, and the team member.
Yeah, the costs. I'm so glad you brought that up because
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
we often think about that. I just had a friend like text me right before this call and was like, they had just hired a manager for her like maybe 4 months ago, and this
Mm.
manager has now left. And I was like, wow, that is a cost. Like not only just the onboarding of that individual and the time it took for all these employees to onboard this individual and do all the things. And you can't help but ask myself, like, did that person actually get set up for success?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how do you think about those costs? Like, what are some examples of hidden costs when we think about balancing immediate need versus long-term team?
I mean, I think that even the hiring process itself, the fact that it takes time is a cost, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
all we all are paid a salary. And so with that salary, there's time that we spend you know, to
Hmm.
live up to the description of our job descriptions. And so, if we're spending 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hours trying to find the right person or more and doing the interviews and doing the follow-up, there's a monetary cost that it takes. And then again, I always think of the candidate too. I've been in the same position where, you know, we've had to you have to interview for a position. So that's your time,
Hmm.
and your cost. And so that's why it's so important to get it right. It's probably one of the hardest things in running an organization is hiring. It's one of the scariest things because you're like, if I get it wrong, it could be totally detrimental and set us back. And if I get it right, we're going to exponentially grow and good things are going to happen. And so I just think it's like it can be a little bit scary sometimes because the stakes are high for a lot of organizations. We want to grow, we want to do well, we want to achieve, we want to do better. And in Hope for Haiti's case, we want to make a bigger impact for people living in Haiti. And so the way we hire it determines our ability to make an impact. That's why it feels pretty high stakes all the time.
I can only imagine. And you're such a mission-oriented company. Not to say not
Hmm.
all companies
Yeah.
are, but I feel like the way you talk about it and even like your culture just feels very mission driven. I'm curious, like, how do you think about hiring for a mission driven company?
Yeah. Well, I think that. the first thing that I like to hear is about experience. Like if somebody's had, and here's why, because experience breeds passion. Experience expires. And so if you think about the things that you care about, think about the causes that you care about most. We all there's certain things as what we care
Mm,
about we may not have even experienced. Like never experienced homelessness, but I care about it.
mm,
May care about that issue. But there are certain things that we also experience that breed passion. And so if you're looking for people who share that passion, oftentimes it's right at their right, it's right at their experience. Like what have you experienced that
mm,
causes you to feel passionate or driven towards this mission? That helps. Um, and then
wonderful.
then secondly, I think that it's important just to hear the why and give people space to explain why they're interested in the job or the opportunity to make a difference. And oftentimes you can really see through authenticity with those answers.
Mm,
So given somebody's explanation of experience and also their why, those two things I think help really make sure you're getting closer to hiring the right person who's ready to work in a mission driven organization. um I have a little preference, but it's not always it's not always like feel safe in hiring the right person, but I tend to gravitate to people who are into like servant leadership and who have worked or shown an example of being part of something that's bigger than themselves, club, a team,
mm,
even like recognizing sometimes it's a university and their school, but something being part of something bigger than yourselves and self and like recognizing that, and recognizing that you play a role in that. If people have
mm.
that mentality, that oftentimes fits really well with the type of mission-based organization that we are at Hope for Haiti.
I
Yeah,
like
I have a
that.
I have a great example too. We have
Oh
one of
yeah.
my colleagues. Unfortunately, she just left, but she made a huge impact for
Mm,
Haiti, and she had to move away. But she was probably one of the best servant leaders at our organization, and you could see it in the way that she approached her work. And it was in the field, so she was running healthcare programs, and she would embed herself with the team. She was a manager, so she would manage, but she would also like embed herself, and she would do the same work as others. She would
cool.
she would build relationships at work. And so by the time, she had her time at Hope for Haiti run its course, she had to leave the country. Beloved, beloved as a colleague. Everybody was like, this person's amazing and has made so much of an impact. And to me, I think it started with her, whether she knew it or not, ability to be a servant leader. And she just served others so well that
Mm,
it shined through in the way that our team responded to her leadership. It's a
that's
good
really
lesson.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that servant leadership is a fascinating skill, not one that can just be turned on. It really comes through that experience. I think
Yeah, a
you're
little
talking
bit.
about. I mean, there's a
Yeah, I think you're
desire,
right.
but it also like just being able to actually do it, I think
Yeah,
helps you become better at
mindset
it.
too. Yeah, it's like a mindset too. Like I was telling somebody the other day, hope nobody thinks they work for me. That would be that
Mm,
that would almost be like demoralizing to me if somebody's like, I work for Skyler. Like it's just I don't
yeah.
like that mentality. It doesn't, and I've heard people say that before. I've even
Mm,
heard like colleagues, like somebody I knew a friend, he was like, yeah, I was up for this job. And the person was like, I can't wait for to have you work for me. And he's like, I didn't take the job. And I'm like, I know why you didn't take the job because you're in service to the mission. And if you're in service, you're working together. You're not working for. And so, um, that feel very strongly about that. Like nobody works for me. We work together.
I like that
And
a lot.
nobody works for them. either. If you're a manager on our team,
Yeah.
if you're a, if you like, there's an org chart, of course, but like, like the thing I think about is my job is to serve my colleagues so that they can be better at what they do. And that makes a bigger impact in the organization. And that makes a bigger impact for people who are incredibly challenged right now in Haiti.
Wow. And that ties back to just like you want someone who's in it for the, like that long-term impact, kind of
Yeah.
back to what you were saying at the beginning of you want to hire someone who's wants to show up and make a long-term impact, not just a couple quick hits and they're out.
Yeah.
Um, and having that kind of skill set or that kind of mindset helps develop that.
Yeah. I even sometimes, I don't know um, well, there's a lot, it depends is my favorite word of the day. But sometimes I know, right? You
Of
see how I
course.
use that? But
Uh-huh.
sometimes, um, like if somebody in an interview is like, I'm not looking for my next 2-year gig. I'm looking for a place where I can like make an impact and grow for 10 years. That gets me excited. Like that's like, okay, this person sees the opportunity, this person sees potential,
Mm,
and it may or may not happen. Like things happen. Organizations scale up, scale down, people come, people go, life changes. But like even the intention,
mm,
that helps for me. And I recognize my bias because that's kind of like I'm like, what is it? There's somebody who's teaching our organization, who's coaching our organization right now. She's a strategic coach, she's amazing. And she's teaching us a lot about bias. And one of my biases is like people who want to stick around and do the work together. But that's kind of like who I am too. Like
uh-huh.
I don't want to stay. I never wanted to stay at Hope for 80 for 2 years. I want to stay for like a decade and make an impact. And then eventually one day when I leave the organization, whenever that is, no plans, but that I'd leave it better off than I found it. And and if somebody comes in with that kind of mentality, I'd say they have a leg up in the hiring process.
I like that a lot. I know you read leadership books, so like some leaders secretively want the organization to fail after they leave, and
Ooh,
you're like, "Ooh, that's terrible." Like
yeah,
assess those people out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but well, very fascinating. Skylar, you have such great stories. You're such a great
Mm,
storyteller. I love it. I'm sure we could talk hours on end
we
about
could.
um
We
all
get an
the cool
extension to this
experiences.
podcast right now.
Yes,
I'm just kidding.
we'll
No, I'm
just
just
have you
kidding.
on
No,
back. We'll just have you on again.
no. I'm just joking.
But I just
Um,
love what Hope for Haiti is doing and
thank you.
how
Thank
mission
you.
driven they are and the organization and how many people you're helping is just really cool. So to kind of tie this all up,
Yeah,
got one last question for you.
great.
So what would you suggest or recommend, like small shifts organizations can make today to really start moving away from the short term isms to think more long term in their hiring and their growth?
Okay, I'm going to try three things, and I'm going to wing it a little bit too.
Okay.
So the first one I think, and we kind of covered this, is hire for core value. Hire
Okay.
for core
Yes.
values,
Good tip.
and your organization or your business, what your core values are, and if you can really figure out which candidates align most with your core values, that might bring you one step closer to hiring the best candidate who's going to make a huge impact for your organization or company. So
I
that's
like
the
that.
first thing.
Okay.
The second thing isn't always about hiring, um, but it's just like so like it kind of goes hand in hand. Like the onboarding process and the support process is an extension of the hiring process. And so that's the other thing is make sure that you're providing support and mentorship in every possible way because people I think today they crave mentorship, they crave support, and then they
Sure.
crave being able to be autonomous and successful in their own, role within an organization or team. So that's the second thing. And then the third, and and that is I'm not saying don't hire the superstar because hire the superstar if you feel it's the right thing for your organization. but don't discount the growth potential of people who might just be a little bit, you might think, underqualified for a job, because sometimes the work ethic to get to um, success in that role might be even greater.
I
And
love
so
that.
if you can figure that out, it's not easy. It's not exact science, I know, but don't discount the ability to hire somebody who's going to just really grow into a role, to stick around for 8 to 10 years.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, there's value. There's tremendous amount of value in that. Tremendous amount of value.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, there you have it,
Jacob
everyone.
just gave me 100%. Thank you,
Yes,
Jacob.
Jacob. Yes,
Somebody's
those
going to give you a prize,
yes, Jacob.
sticker.
We're gonna send you something for being so engaged in the chat. Okay, so those are three really great tips. We will definitely send this out for those who have registered, those who registered but didn't attend. So Skylar will include those tips. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We wish you the
No,
best on
thank you, Anna.
growing your team and the amazing work you guys are doing. So glad you were here, and hopefully we can have you back and you can tell more stories.
Really
It's been so
appreciate it. And
really fun.
thanks for helping us shine a light on Hope for Haiti as well, and the work we're doing in Haiti.
100%. We are also mission driven, and we always want to spotlight those who are doing such great work. So
It's beautiful.
thank you, Skylar. Just a couple quick things before we totally wrap up. Our next episode will be on the chapter of career development, and what that misses around finding growth outside your lane. And super excited to have Jake Alsop come on next month. So if you want to come to that, please register. And then if you're not a part of our community, we have a Slack community. We'd love to continue this conversation or other conversations in our Slack community. So please join us there. And thanks again for just taking time out of your day. We know a lot of you are so busy putting out fires and helping other people that I'm glad that you took some time out for yourself to listen to this awesome guest series and having Skylar on. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.